I know we only have like 30 minutes. We'll leave some time for some questions if there are in the end. Again, my name is Jason Assir, my colleague Jason Fisher. No, it's not the case that everyone that works with us at EnergyGigs is named Jason. Although if you have a J in your first or last name, that's always a plus. Our marketing executive, Juliana Herman, is also with the J there. So what we're going to do is we're just going to go through some updates. Feel free to put some questions in the chat at any point in time, and we can go through the questions then. And we'll also have time at the end of the webinar for any additional questions that you all might have. So at this point, I'm just going to share my screen. And we will get going. Okay, so the agenda for today's webinar is it's pretty brief, short and sweet. We're going to just talk through briefly our mission and our services, what we offer. We're going to talk about our new brand. We've been working with some freelancers, big surprise, to help update our brand. And Juliana has been leading that effort. We'll also go through sort of company updates as a whole. First on updates regarding the beta of EnergyGigs.com, which is live, but is in sort of beta mode. Then we'll talk through sort of our offline services work that we've done in the last 6 months, and then also work coming up in terms of the sales pipeline and also projects that we have in flight. And then finally, we're going to talk through the roles that we're recruiting for, both on the freelancer side as well as for contingent search or executive search and placement. And then we'll wrap it up with time for Q&A. But please feel free to ask any questions that you might have at any point in the chat. And then Jason or I will take it up then. All right. Without further ado, so for those that we haven't spoken to, or those who are not aware, we really have two main missions. We are a for-profit entity, and so we do have a profit motive, and so part of that is to connect companies to energy talent across the energy industry spectrum on a just-in-time basis. And this could be freelance projects, contractor projects. It could be and it's anywhere in the energy industry. So it could be upstream oil and gas, downstream, turnarounds. It could be commodity markets, trading, and any specialties within that spectrum too. So it's not just, for example, remote work and software development. It's field-based work. It's engineering-based work. It's if it relates to energy, then that's sort of where we like to play. And so how we connect companies to the talent via freelance projects, where we sort of broker the transaction. And that can be hourly projects, it could be fixed fee projects, or it could be temp to perm projects. Or it's also where companies say, hey, can you help us find certain executives or certain hard to find talent in certain areas? So for example, the areas of geothermal or ammonia or hydrogen, which are, for example, areas that we've seen some traction in. So that's sort of how we work, and that's how we make our money. But then the other part of our mission really is, we want to ensure that as energy changes, and we provide on-ramps for talent to ensure that, as it evolves, people don't get left behind in the process. So we, for example, are very keen on the idea of, as the coal industry is in cyclical sort of decline, the question we have is how are people that have worked their whole lives or multi-generations in coal, how are they moving on with the energy industry that's moving on away from coal? And so that's really part of the mission of EnergyGigs, is to provide those on-ramps to talent, allow people to easily switch from one area of the energy industry to another area of energy industry that's growing. And yeah, so that sort of guides how we work. I would say it's our North Star, but obviously there's two missions there. So I don't know if you can have two North Stars, but that's really our focus. How do we do it? There's really two main services that we provide. We have an online service, which is our platform at EnergyGigs.com. And that's where companies can post projects and find freelance talents, job seekers, people that are looking to work on a temp to perm basis, and that's where we broker those transactions, or through retained search, which is an offline service, which functions in many ways just like a traditional staffing agency or talent agency that companies come to us and say, hey, I can't find someone in this particular area. Please help us find it. And our sort of strategy in that regard is that we have experts on our staff that are, like Jason Fisher, for example. He's got 7+ years of field-based geothermal, consulting experience. So as energy companies, particularly oil and gas drilling companies, are looking to get into the geothermal space, they can talk to someone who's an expert in the space about how to find the right talent for it. And that's sort of our differentiation. We use our experts to hire your experts, if you will. So talking now about our brand, right? So we've had this brand, with sort of pastels type colors, since we've been working on this project, and since we spun out and become an independent corporation last year, and it served us well. But over the course of talking to users, talking to companies and freelancers of various age groups, we kind of realized that accessibility of the of the color scheme, of the pastel color scheme, it was getting to be a little bit harder for certain populations to really use the platform. And so the goal here was to come up with a new color scheme that wasn't a dramatic departure, but that allowed it, made it easier for all of the users of our service to really access and use the platform. And so we've gone from something that's white and gray and yellow to something that is a little bit, we think, sort of stronger and easier to see and view. And so we've kind of brought this new color in. It's like a darker blue. And we've also modified the logo a little bit, so that you still have the EG of EnergyGigs, but it's now combined. And the blue is reminiscent, for those that have worked in upstream, offshore industry. It sort of almost harkens to the notion of equipment going, subsurface or going, below the ocean, and the bright yellow so that you can see it, the safety elements of yellow. So we kept the white, but we now moved to something a little bit that's easier to see in contrast. And then as part of that, we're what we say is reskinning the UI. So we're in the process of, our dev team is in the process of changing the way our website looks, the sort of what we call the marketing landing page, to be cleaner, to also better articulate, what it is we do and what services we offer to companies and, candidates, that being job seekers or freelancers. So with that in mind, I'm just going to quickly go through some progress on EnergyGigs.com, the beta of our site. So we went live literally 4 hours from New Year's last year with our beta. Our investor that we worked with had said, hey, we got to go live by the end of the year. You promised you're going to go live by the end of the year. And just by hook or crook, we were able to go live within 4 hours. But since then, we've been pushing updates to the platform. There still are some bugs in the platform, but better to launch early than too late. At present, we have about 75 freelancers on the platform, or job candidates or job seekers on the platform, and 4 companies across boutique, change management consulting, and upstream, geothermal drilling sectors on the platform. We are in the process of pushing out a major release, or basically a major update to the platform, and that will have these 5 things. It will have a lot of the bug fixes to the UI. So a lot of the bug fixes that many of the freelancers had found for us, or seed, or that our team has found, we're slowly making our way and pushing those out. We're going to align to the new brand that we have. So you'll see that darker blue come into picture. We've completed the reviews and rating part of the platform. So one of the core values, if you will, of EnergyGigs is of our company is transparency, and we think reviews and ratings will really drive drive the transparency model that we have, so that companies can see, which freelancers are highly reviewed, highly rated, and then vice versa. Freelancers and job seekers can see which companies are highly reviewed and rated, so that each can make a determination whether or not working with each other makes sense, right? The next piece is, and this is a pretty major one, it's going to come a little bit later, it's payments, US payments, both for companies to post jobs onto the platform, as well as the brokering of the transaction between the company user and the freelancer via Stripe, which is the payment service that we're going to be using. There are obviously some KYC, which is know your customer, know your contractor requirements there, to ensure that there's not any money laundering, related stuff happening, basically. But that's a major update that's going to be coming later on. And then finally, the job board, which is a feature that some of the companies that we've talked to have requested to be able to post jobs, and the job seeker flow to allow freelancers or job seekers to sort of navigate the world of, hey, I maybe want to consult, but also maybe want to seek a full-time job, to allow those candidates to easily toggle back and forth between those two sort of states. With that in mind, though, we are always open to new feature requests and comments. So as we go through this webinar, please do reach out and say, hey, one thing I noticed, if you have any feature requests, please let us know. We'd love to include that into our roadmap if it makes sense. I think I'll pause at this moment. I guess Fisher or Juliana, do you guys know if there are any questions from anyone in the audience at the moment?
No, I don't see any questions in the chat or in the Q&A box section.
Okay. Well, cool. Well, Jason, if you have any questions, you're welcome to ask. All right, so moving on into progress of our offline services and our overall sales pipeline. So since working on this, we've completed about 20 remote consulting engagements and 1 field-based consulting engagement overseas. So remote projects, what we've worked on have been in the form of copywriting projects, long-form journalism. So, for example, we helped the downstream valve manufacturer connect with a journalist to write an article in Oil and Gas Journal and get it published. We've also, cut sheets or media sheets for conferences and related marketing assets. We've connected companies in the downstream side to freelancers that do that type of work. And true to form, we also are consumers of the work that some of these freelancers do, and so we have our own brochures that our freelancers have created as well there, and then also more detailed engineering design work for 3D mock-ups and 3D renderings for engineering intensive sort of related work. We have last year, and this is truly not a big update because most people maybe that have been following us may already know about this, but just to mention it here for anyone new, we did place our first field-based consultant last November, and he worked there in Ethiopia through December. And maybe at this point, maybe I'll pause, Jason, and maybe can you talk a little bit about this role for those that may want to know a little bit more about what we did here?
Yeah, so this geothermal wireline engineer role was pretty simple and straightforward role. Client just needed a well testing engineer with geothermal experience running PTS spinner tools downhole in geothermal wells. It's not the same as running wireline in conventional oil and gas because you have to know the temperature differences and how to manage the runs and to safely operate in extremely hot environments. It's completely different from pressure, temperature, and spinner tools that are utilized in oil and gas. So we needed to identify somebody with the ideal skills and years of experience in the geothermal space, and somebody that was in the Africa region proper and that was able to travel to Ethiopia for this project. We went through 50 or 60 applicants, and then we found the right one that did the job successfully. barring minor challenges that may have happened throughout the project.
Yeah, that's great. I mean, it was what was I remember was just remarkable about that project is that it was truly a global sourcing effort, right? Like it was
Yes.
the client was a New Zealand-based geothermal consulting company. I guess the driller was a UK-based corporation.
UK-based, yeah.
Our
And then candidates, the candidates range from USA, Canada, Europe, Indonesia, and Africa, of course.
yeah, and I guess our main point of contact was a Greek gentleman living in Mexico, and your work is obviously in Cayman Islands. So it was truly like if you put it on a map, it's kind of a it just shows the global nature of energy really in many ways. The other thing that we worked on is a strategic search for a VC-backed geothermal startup in Austin, and I think that's an interesting one too, Jason. Maybe you could talk through because it kind of helped them find a talented person from a traditional oil and gas to work in geothermal, right?
Yes, because for those who don't know, coil tubing is a very popular well intervention method that has been used in the oil and gas industry since antiquity. And now in the geothermal space, we're starting to look more on the utilization of coil tubing in order to reduce costs and not have to shut down the well during any form of well intervention. So for this project, the client is working on developing new coil tubing activities, new coil tubing methods to do geothermal wells globally. And for this role, they wanted somebody with the ideal coil tubing experience and somebody that worked with technology advancement inside of the coil tubing field. And we vetted maybe 25 coil tubing drilling candidates throughout the United States, all from the oil and gas industry, and all with high dreams of expanding out of the oil and gas industry. And we found the right candidate with the right drive, and that has actually worked on geothermal wells, not using coil tubing, but using other form of drilling well intervention methods, and then they ended up choosing the right candidate for the job.
That's great. That's awesome. Here, I'm gonna go back to sharing real quick. Thanks, Jason. Yeah, it's great to for you to add that additional color. Does anyone have any questions about maybe some of those two projects that Jason just described, or about anything that we've done so far?
No questions.
No questions. Okay, great. No worries. All right, moving on. So just kind of a brief update. Trying to we've obscured the names or hidden the names to not get ourselves into trouble. But our sales pipeline is pretty good. I've been consulting for the last 16 years in energy, in operations, process improvement, working with private equity firms, with technology companies, big enterprises, and we're getting really great traction relative to my experience selling just traditional consulting services to selling what we're selling now. We're really seeing some really great traction. So our pipeline, for example, right now, we have a global publicly traded EPC or engineering consulting firm that's using us to help source key roles in the area of ammonia, hydrogen, flow assurance, and environmental consulting. We have, with the sort of renewed interest in geothermal, particularly around companies in the upstream oil and gas space that have similar technologies. We have a sort of contract in negotiations with a well construction service company that's looking to expand their geothermal presence in the European markets. And so we're helping them find the appropriate business development executive there. A boutique change management consulting firm here in Houston, Texas, needs us for a number of different roles. We actually currently have someone placed with an upstream oil and gas independent exploration production company right now in change management. And then we have more recently, as of like last week, we have an opportunity that we're pursuing with a well site service and technology company that needs help around power quality and harmonics. And this is a funny story because my father is a power engineer. He's been in the engineering space for 40 plus years. This is one of those opportunities where I was glad to be able to call him and ask him about, hey, do you know of anyone that knows about power quality and harmonics? Because I quickly had to do a Wikipedia search about what it was exactly that the client needed. So these are some interesting opportunities that coming our way. It's sort of in many ways across the value stream in energy. Roles that we have that we're hiring for right now. So for any of you that are currently looking for work, these are roles that we're on the freelance side and on the strategic search that we're actually working on. And so please do reach out to us if you if you are looking for either a short-term consulting role or you're looking for a permanent role. So the roles that we have, for example, as of yesterday, we have a UX UI consultant for an EP company. Basically, this person needs to be familiar with user experience design, service blueprints, ideally has some experience with exploration and production, but should have also a strong experience working in a sort of a Microsoft sort of environment, like companies that are familiar with, consultants that are familiar with SharePoint, and also have strong UX UI design capabilities will do well in this role. We have another change management project manager working for an EMP company. That role is coming up pretty soon, as well as an enterprise architect and infrastructure blueprint mapping role. So these three roles are pretty IT centric, if you will, all working on behalf of this boutique change management firm that we are working with. The fourth role on the consulting side is unique in that it's this power quality harmonics role for an upstream oil and gas company, service company that we mentioned. The client needs someone on standby that has strong capabilities in this area. And we've already started talking to people, have one really solid person in mind, but we're always looking for new people as well, because typically we like to give the client options in terms of who they want to work with. And then regarding strategic search, so there's this geothermal business development executive for Europe. Ideally, this person is located in, I believe, Jason, is it Aberdeen or Germany? Is that right? Like those would be the ideal locations?
Well, anywhere in Europe is fine. I think once they're in Europe, available and willing to travel, then it's fine.
Okay, yeah. So that's a pretty exciting role. I think the client is open to looking at candidates across the spectrum, but as long as they have, if they have oil and gas and geothermal, that would be the perfect candidate. But if they have just geothermal, I mean, that would be also fantastic. Hydrogen engineering lead, ammonia engineering lead, environmental specialist. These are all Houston-based roles for a publicly traded European engineering consulting firm, EPC. And pretty interesting role. It's a company that's sort of transitioning in a really interesting way to get into the new technologies. So these are all the roles that we have.
Questions. Two questions.
Cool.
So how do we apply and or share these roles? How do we apply for and or share these roles?
Great. So I believe some of these roles are on the platform and you could apply there, but we will make sure that they will be on the platform if they're not already. So that's one thing. But in lieu of in interest of expediency, please you can right after this call, or just right now, we can reach out to you. You can reach out to us and we can get you in the pipeline for any of these roles that you want immediately. So there's you don't have to really apply online right now. You can just reach out to us directly. So Jason Fisher or myself for any of those roles.
All right, thank you. Another question or two questions in one. Are you seeing that there are a lot of more remote roles, or are you seeing more on-site roles?
Good question. I think it runs the spectrum. I think all of our roles initially, more than half of our roles were remote, but like these 4 roles, with the exception perhaps of the UX UI design role, those are all on site. And it really depends on, I think, the client. But we candidly probably have not, we don't have enough information to say that there's a trend one way or another, I would say. Is that fair, Jason?
Yes, I think so.
Yeah.
And then also another one is, we know there's been a big shift in the energy industry, or shifting happening in the energy industry. Where do we see the roles coming from in the near future? Is it largely for traditional oil and gas, or is it for, growing industries, hydrogen, carbon capture, environmental aspects of energy, solar, wind?
Yeah, I mean, I think I might need your help on answering that. That's a really good question. I think where we're seeing opportunities and also challenges is that companies are looking to hire in, strategically, they're trying to hire in adjacent areas that make sense for their business. So you see, for example, carbon capture being a hot area, or hydrogen or ammonia being hot areas, because for a lot of these companies, it's not too difficult for them to transition into that, because there's a lot of adjacent skills. Where you see there are some challenges, I feel like, or in geothermal is another example. Sorry, geothermal is also another example. Where you see challenges is there's a little bit of like the recruiting process on the company side is, the expectation is that they're trying to hire people with 5+, 6+, 10+ years experience, but a lot of these roles and these new areas of work didn't really exist in a big way then. And so there's a bit of a expectation that you're going to find people that have a lot of experience, but it's really that market is pretty tight. And so the smarter organizations, what they are trying to do is figuring out how to build those on-ramps that we talked about at the beginning of the webinar, to allow people that have the right skill set to get into there, or how do they augment their team to be able to do that. And we help with that in some ways. I don't know, Jason, do you want to add anything to that? Is that sort of what you're seeing as well?
Yes, I agree. I think a lot of the hiring will end up will come from people moving from one industry to the next. So a lot of people with oil and gas experience will be shifting into geothermal, or they'll be shifting into carbon capture. On the other hand, for hydrogen, there have been tons of studies done and reports published on workforce development for the hydrogen industry. And in those reports, there are several reports in the US. The Australian government has made a report. The European government is also working on one, different governments in Europe, and they all have a roadmap for developing the hydrogen skills they'll need. And then in the US, they're looking to develop hydrogen hubs throughout the entire US, several different hydrogen hubs, and one is going to be somewhere in Texas. So with that said, their workforce roadmaps, development roadmaps that have been created for hydrogen. So at some point, there's going to be a big hydrogen boom. So there'll be a lot of roles open for hydrogen. And then hopefully with the hydrogen roadmap, they'll also develop university level or certification courses that will help people get one step closer into getting these jobs. And we should not ever forget that the environmental side of things is always there. So we still need people to work on the environmental side of hydrogen, the environmental side of geothermal, the environmental side of carbon capture, because it's still a thing, and it's a part of the entire system that we have to successfully manage to successfully use these energy sources.
Yeah, I mean, and so you like, in terms of a lot of the roles that we're seeing that companies are hiring for, there's like these strategic sort of resource roles around ammonia, for example, or hydrogen, or
and environmental roles.
And then there are these corporate-led initiatives that a lot of companies are tackling. So you see ESG roles, or you still see digital transformation. But those are the big pillars that we see a lot of. Any other questions? Those are the good questions.
No other questions at this time. Plus, we're a little bit 3 minutes over too.
Oh,
So
okay.
good timing.
Well, hey, great. Thank you for everyone for attending. Jason, thanks for bringing your knowledge, kicking your knowledge. If anyone has any questions, feel free to reach out to Jason or myself. If you're interested in those roles, please also reach out to us, and we'll get you plugged into the process. But otherwise, thank you so much for sharing your time, your lunch hour with us. Look forward to catching you all on the next webinar we do next month.